Sin más preámbulos, empezamos. Reloj, 9 minutos. El primer contrincante, el rabino Shmuley Boteach. Welcome. Do you see how tall I am and how tall Daniel Dennett is? I mean, does this look like this is a fair match? My friends, a man is on his deathbed, and his priest says to him, before you die in your last moments, renounce Satan and condemn his evil. And the man is silent. And the priest says again, these are your last moments of life, renounce Satan and condemn his evil. And still the man is silent. And the priest says, why will you not finally renounce Satan? And the man lifts his head up to his full stature. He looks at the priest and he says, Father, until I know where I'm going, I'm not antagonizing anybody. What's it been like for all of you who raised your hands to say that you're on the side of religion? To hear speaker after speaker, scientist after scientist, tell you that you are nothing but a superstitious, backward, knuckle-dragging Neanderthal. Don't you know that science has replaced religion? In fact, in the one slide I'm going to use, miracles of modern technology. Okay, now you see the evolution of man? That guy over there at the very end, that's the evolutionary scientist. If you count a few back, you get the man who believes that the Apollo landing was in a television studio. Just behind him is the man who believes that the earth is flat. And all the way on the bottom, the guy like this, he believes that Elvis is still alive. And just behind him is the guy who believes in God. We're too mature to play games. Religion involves not much more faith than science. First of all, if we want to believe in God because we're afraid of death, would we really have invented a God who judges us after death? Is that comforting? On the contrary, if you were someone who ran a crematory at Auschwitz, what would you prefer to believe? That there's a God who's going to catch up to you and enact justice? Or that you can escape in the silence of the grave? In fact, Aldous Huxley said that atheism itself has intellectual reasons for the dismissal of God. Aldous Huxley was from the most famous of all evolutionary families. He said, I had reasons for the world not to have meaning. The philosophy of meaningless was an instrument of my liberation from morality because it interfered with my sexual freedom. Which is very nice. First of all, that there's a scientist who can be very forthright and candid. And secondly, it's nice to know there's still a guy in England having sex. Now, my friends, let's first begin with the faith inherent in science. Science says that a series of genetic mistakes, genetic mutations, led to the great complexity of our world. How complex? Well, if the Earth wasn't tilted 23 degrees on its axis, giant mountains of ice would be caused by the water vapor from the oceans. It would decimate life on Earth. If the Earth did not rotate 1,000 miles an hour on its own axis, if it were slower, it would freeze seedlings at night. It would scorch plants during the day. If the moon were any closer to our planet, then the tides would bring the oceans and make life on Earth impossible. The problem, however, is that genetic mutation, according to the scientists themselves, is A, so rare, about 1 in 1,000 is a DNA mutation, and second, they're never beneficial. These are mistakes. A.J. Miller is the man who devoted more study than any other individual to mutations. He says, the great majority of all mutations, certainly well over 99%, are harmful, as to be expected of the effect of an accidental occurrence. Muller goes on to say, and he won a Nobel Prize, good mutations are so rare that we can consider them all bad. Now, how many mutations would it take, for example, to create a horse? Well, for that we go to Julian Huxley, one of the world's most famous evolutionists. He says, a proportion of favorable mutations of 1 in 1,000 does not sound like much, but it's probably an understatement. With this proportion, get ready for this, we should have to breed 1,000,000 strains, 1,000 squared, to get one containing 2 favorable mutations, and so on up to 1,000 to the millionth power, if you can even understand numbers these big, to get something containing 1,000,000. 1,000 to the millionth power is one with 3 million zeros after it. It would take 3 books of 500 pages just to write it. Now, why would anyone believe in this? The answer is simple. Science says given enough time, anything can happen. But if you speak about an infinity of time, how different is that to an infinite God? This becomes semantics. The two become almost too similar to distinguish. And I'm not saying evolution didn't happen. It could very well be that evolution is true. In fact, as someone who believes in the Bible also speaks about the progression from the mineral to the vegetable to the animal to the intellectual, an evolutionary progression. I'm simply saying the numbers this big, and Sam Harris is speaking right after me, address this. You're talking about numbers you can have all the time in the world, and something that has 300,000 zeros after it. How could it possibly take place without some sort of guiding hand? My friends, religion isn't really only about how the world is created, and that's just a sideshow. The chapters in Genesis that deal with the creation of the world are only 2 or 3. What religion really is the most radical statement in the history of the world, which is that every single one of you possesses the power to choose the kind of person you want to be. There is a God who gave us moral commandments, and that without God, then the laws of do not kill, do not steal, do not commit adultery are nothing but euphemisms for personal taste. Because if there isn't a God, who is the ultimate arbiter and the standard by which these laws have definition, then all we have are 2 different people who are disagreeing. I want Sam Harris to please address. A child is born and he has severe Down syndrome. He will never be anything but a burden to his parents. He has a financial strain. Special needs children often even ruin the marriages of their parents. Why should we not euthanize that child? We get so upset that Hitler euthanized the infirm. But doesn't that sort of make sense? In fact, Francis Crick, who won a Nobel Prize for the DNA molecule, mapping the DNA molecule, said that we should really define birth as 2 days after parturition so that a baby could be examined for defects. And if those defects were sufficiently deleterious, we could declare the child to not yet have been born. The only reason we keep that child alive, even though we all live in societies of limited resources, is because life is sacred, not because of the quality of life, but the sanctity of life. There is no rational reason. Somewhere right now, there is a police officer in the north of Mexico, and he barely earns enough money to support his family. And a drug dealer wants to give him a few extra bucks to look the other way while they smuggle cocaine into the United States. And no one's ever going to find out, and no one's ever going to see, and no one's ever going to know. Tell me one reason that police officer should not take the money when he needs it for his family. Give me one moral reason other than the idea that there is justice in the world and that we have the power to choose our moral character. Everything we've heard in this conference is that people almost have no choice. Science seems to be going against choice. Biological determinism, genetic predisposition. Freud said we're far less masters of our own mental household than we otherwise suppose, and out of control id and ego. But religion says that at every moment you have the power to choose. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.